Hi there. Welcome to the Right Here, Right Now live show. This show has one simple question. What's on your heart and mind right here, right now in this moment? We explore the depths and breadths of our humanity through that one simple question over the course of 30 to 45 minutes. I hope that you'll join us. I hope you'll enjoy the exploration. And this tune was created for me personally by the incredible Peter Griffiths, one half of the amazing Mind Takeaway. Do let us know what you think. Let us know what you take away. And of course, we always welcome challenges too. Hope to see you on the exploration. Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're on the world. Gary Turner here, host of the Right Here, Right Now live show. Before I bring my guest from the backstage, I feel a little bit starstruck to have the Farzad with me, but I'm going to bring him on very, very shortly. Before that, what I just want to share with you very quickly, if you're based in the UK, got an amazing event taking place across the 5th to the 7th of April 2022. It's an executive retreat for 8 senior leaders or CEOs that really want to reimagine their connection to themselves, to one another, and to systems at large in a very emergent, co-creative space. So if that sounds appealing, do drop me a DM. It's being co-hosted and facilitated by myself and Joe Homstead. And yeah, it'd be great to hear from you. But hey, let's get through to the main event. Let me bring the main man, Farzin. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me here. This is lovely. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Oh, not at all. I'm just, I will say to everybody watching, I've stalked Farzin a little bit. He's been quite generous and sort of dealt with me over the last couple of months. But like I say, I really want to say thanks for joining me today. And I'd love for you to start, Farzin, before we go into that one question. Just give our viewers who are watching live or maybe watch this back just a little bit more of a lowdown as to Farzin and the work that you're doing.
Sure. So I think traditionally, I guess you would refer to me as a diversity, equity, inclusion practitioner based out of the United States, specifically in Virginia. I have a small sort of boutique DEI consulting firm called Critical Equity Consulting. I have, over the past several months, rebranded from calling myself a DEI practitioner to an organizational justice practitioner, which I believe is much more holistic and encompasses a lot of the things that I really want to kind of focus on in this specific area. So kind of differentiating myself and finding my niche in that space. I think that's the idea behind it. But yeah, I'm a quote unquote solopreneur with Critical Equity. I have a partner that I work with who does our Ulduz, who does our data analysis when we do our surveys. And so that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Thanks for the introduction. Just want to say thanks. John's popped along. Thanks for joining us, John. If you've got any questions, do feel free to engage live with us. So, as I say, I want to really appreciate you as we get going. You know, I mentioned it before we started, Farzin, you know, how you show up, you know, your truth that you share with us all so generously. So thank you for that. We've got the one key question and we'll learn a bit more about you. You know, what is on your heart and mind right here, right now, in this particular moment, Farzin?
So I'm not gonna lie. When we first interacted, and it was just that single question, it reminded me of my college biology course, where my professors had one question on the final exam, which is what is life, and so like end to end, like write this, like fill out several of those little blue books of information of what we learned throughout the entire course. And so it kind of felt like that in the moment. It's like, there's so much on my mind right now. But I think as I was like thinking these things through, I think one thing really, really stood out that I can boil everything down to, and that is the nature of power in our workplaces, in our society, in our relationships. And I think it's very, very important to the work that I do, because we, as practitioners, tend to love talking about how power shows up and being mindful of power, but you know, based on social constraints more so than anything else, we can't really interrogate it, right? So, and that's after years and years of doing this work, right? I had been doing like a lot of these interventions. I've been strategizing, developing different ways, ERGs, inclusive conversations, all these trainings, all these like development of DEI councils, all these things. And like a lot of them took a lot of energy to do and maintain, sustain, and eventually kind of dissipated over time, right? And so, you know, every time we kind of had these conversations, it's still always reverted back to how is power codified in the workplace and in our society? And power is codified through the hierarchy, right? You have your leader, CEO, and you have your deputies or C-suite, and then it continuously goes down into this like pyramidal structure of hierarchy, which always lends itself to the concentration of power and then wealth as well, right? Society is very much kind of modeled that way. So even though we like to think of ourselves in a democracy, we still, because we spend 8 hours a day of our lives working in this hierarchical structure, very authoritarian systems, you know, if you think of a complex authoritarian system, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, everybody and then the CEO. It's, you know, it's a pyramid, right? So like in these structures, we're expected to go live in society and then kind of participate in a democracy. Whereas, you know, we don't do that because we're just kind of, first off, there's a lot on our plates. Second off, we kind of have this mentality, oh, we elect our officials and then we're out. You know, that's, everything is on them. So, so true power, if we want to kind of interrogate true power, we have to think about participation. We have to think about distribution of power, right? And so all that to say, I came to the realization that in order to do effective DEI work or organizational justice work, we're missing the key ingredient of interrogating power in the workplace, right? Of structurally distributing power, of structurally creating environments where one person does not have ultimate say in things, and eventually one person's biases don't have too much power, right? So that's what I've been thinking about a lot. I've been thinking about like, you know, what workplace and societal mechanisms lend themselves to better democratic decision making, better democratic distribution of the output as well as the wealth generated from that output. Meaning like, you know, are we like actual equity, you know, stake in the in the you know, the stock share or like the organization itself. So been looking a lot about like cooperatives, employee-owned structures, whether it's the structure itself or the culture replicated of those things, of those like formats. I think they have created environments that are much, much more conducive to liberation, which usually will result in the liberation of your identity. So like if you kind of distribute power, it kind of dissipates fear. So we automatically start having more psychological safety, and that lends itself to showing up more authentically, and that means more authentically for my contributions as well as my inherent worth and my identity, right? So, so I think that's where I've been thinking about, and then you know, taking it from there. Like you have these power distributed organizations. The next step is, how do they operate with one another, and how do they create positive ecosystems, right? How do they you know, collaborate societally, and just keep building and building upon there to kind of extrapolate it into like literally everything, to democratize everything that we do. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I love it, and that comes through, may I say, Farzin, it comes through in every word and every post you put out. The congruence through which you give that message is so powerful. So I've got a load of places I want to go with you, but first of all, I want to say hi to Vivian. There she goes. She's got a popcorn, a notebook, and a growth mindset. You'll need that with our friend Farzin and Katerina. Awesome. Katrina, sorry, my apologies. Thanks for joining us, Katrina. Yeah, distribution, interrogation of power. So I know a couple of people well known to you. Now, I'm really, really fascinated by this because I've also seen, Farzin, you share some posts recently about self-management, which of course is another decentralized way of organizing. What I'm particularly interested in, that explanation that you just shared, it's really interesting because we're still in this world, I feel, and I love your thoughts on this, where we're still compartmentalizing DEI, HR, finance, sales. And I think the liberation piece for me comes from realizing that all of those things are deeply wedded together, and that somehow we need to jointly be accountable for all of those things rather than seeing ourselves as one part of the system. Is that a key part of power distribution, or would you challenge or build on that, Farzin?
That's a great question. I mean, I think all of that specifically comes from a very sort of Adam Smith-based understanding of how economies work, right? Like, so the distribution of labor and specialization, kind of elevated a lot of how we do things and allowed us to specialize and kind of, improve and things like that. But I think to the degree that we've kind of done this into like the capitalist system that we created has been runaway of this, right? So there's nothing wrong with boosting skills and knowing things, like being really into something and then developing those skills. And, you don't have to be good at everything. And that's what, the collective is all about. But the driver has always been personal and individual growth rather than that connectedness you're talking about, that collective, that understanding that, where what I'm good at, I'm going to contribute according to that. What you're good at, you're going to contribute according to that. And collectively, we're going to come to the same result. We have all of these like issues in the workplace. We talk about siloing. We talk about like our workplaces are so disconnected. Like they're doing, I don't know what that group is doing. And it's only the leadership that understands the big picture and all these things. And they lend themselves to so many issues, I think, that can be, a lot of it can just be fundamentally addressed by this shift in your mindset of we're all operating in not just connectedness within our workplaces, but our workplace, how it's connected to the community we're in, and then to other working environments in our vicinity or around the country, or around the world, actually, if we have organizations at scale, right? So I think that idea of moving from extractive individualistic capitalism to cooperative economics is a fundamental mindset cultural shift needed to start moving into self-management, start breaking the hierarchy, because the hierarchy relies on a command structure, and the command structure requires that you have these tasks, this is where you are, you're on a need-to-know basis, do these things, and then make sure those report to you that do these things, and then we're just going to kind of keep these things compartmentalized. I mean, that's necessary. You think of command structures in the military, in religious institutions, right? They're all based on this particular model. What I believe works much more effectively in organizations, and actually the data shows this, and hopefully, if we learn how to do this, we can extrapolate this to the societal level, is cooperatively kind of understand all of us kind of more democratically share decisions, more democratically kind of distribute the earnings of the organization, and more democratically recognize that our organization is a part of an environment that we have to protect because time is running out on this planet, right? And so the more brains you have in the room to kind of talk these things through, you're automatically creating the structure for better output and outcomes, right? Without even, irrespective of the type of idea, right? Whether you kind of create something that's a good or bad idea, it's going to eventually lead to, even if you put that aside, the fact that there's multiple people in the room contributing authentically automatically has better outcomes, right? Than a single individual deciding certain things for the organization, deciding things for the country, society, the globe. You're giving power to that individual. You're also giving power to what they don't know, their biases and these things. So, in a long-winded answer, cooperative economics requires us to think more connected, to think more collectively.
It's why I'm so excited about what you're doing. I don't think I know of another person in my LinkedIn network that calls themselves an organizational justice consultant. no, you've been so intentional about that justice piece.
Yeah.
And it doesn't devalue any of the other DEI work I see going on around the world, which is brilliant. But I'm really curious, was there a particular experience of your life, if I may ask, Farzin, that really said, like, it's the justice piece, I know that's my leverage point, and this is why, that's the piece I have to follow?
That's a good question. I mean, I came into, haphazardly fell into DEI from having a background in human rights advocacy. And so, like, when you're in that space, you tend to, and then when you learn about how diplomacy works and how, like, all these, like, countries kind of sell themselves in a way that's hides their dehumanization of their ethnic groups or religious groups and things like that, you can kind of learn to differentiate between what's real and what's performative. I mean, it's a transferable experience. So when I came into the DEI space, like, I saw a lot of these things that were, very inspirational, celebratory, and that has a place, of course, right? Like, people love celebrating their heritage months because it's a feel good thing, and you learn about one another, and that's very important. But that's where it ended. And, like, I used to think, like, wow, this is very much like X country, going to the UN and saying these things about, oh yeah, we're a mosaic of different cultures and all that stuff, like empty rhetoric, right? When you know that they're harming these groups at a much higher rate than the dominant group, right? Which is also true of this country as well, in Canada and European countries and anywhere else that is traditionally viewed as much more open and democratic, which is in and of itself an arm of colonialism, but that's a different conversation. But so I think, like, those types of experiences kind of set my foundation. And then so I started to kind of study ethnicity. I did that in grad school. I studied abroad, came back to the US. Ethnic identity, ethnic politics, ethnic conflict, identity related issues. Then I went on to kind of continue my studies in anti-racism or colonial racism studies and things like that. And so, like, I think those types of experiences kind of contributed to, I don't want to, like, kind of, how do I put this? Like, being able to kind of see past the curtain to see, like, what's real versus, like, what's show, what's performative, what's that kind of stuff. So I decided to, use the term organizational justice because not only, because I'd seen it, out there, I was researching, but when I saw it, like, I was like, this is much more clean, much more direct and to the point, and it really, like, conveys what I'm trying to do much more easily than the word salad these days of things that are popping up, like DEI, JEDI, DIB, all these things, which are very, very important components of the work. But I just think organizational justice really, like, I saw it and I was like, wow, this hammers it home, right? It's justice focused. This is what's real. We love to celebrate. We love to kind of elevate people for what they're doing well, which is wonderful. But until we're addressing the harm that's being caused and addressing the things that are affecting people in a broad sense, their day-to-day lives, like, are they able to spend time with family? Are they getting paid adequately for their labor? Are they being promoted? Are they being evaluated in their performance evaluations fairly based on the work that they're doing, based on the experience that they have? All these things that we traditionally associate with equity and justice are sort of, yeah, we'll talk about it, but what are we going to really do? So, like, I think, like, when I chose organizational justice, it very much hints at that part of it, rather than what can be construed as more performative.
I think it's so powerful for me because I say, as I followed your work, I work still within the belly of the beast, Farzin. So I'm working in the chemical industry, one of the most extractive on the planet. And my role, I feel, is as I become more aware of how all these interconnections are actually made up. It's like, oh my God. To share a very quick story. So I mentioned Sam Sapaya before we came on, who's my guide based in the Philippines. So there's this amazing situation, not good, just incredible learning for me in the last 3 months, which is there's a place called West Papua down on the west coast of Papua New Guinea, which has the world's largest gold mine. There's two companies, Rio Tinto and Freeport from the US. They own the rights to mine in West Papua. So you then start to go, oh, that's really curious. So, okay, so it's a bit of necklace around my neck, gold necklace. It could come from West Papua. What's happening in West Papua? Oh, the local indigenous people are fighting to save their lives because the Indonesian government are trying to dominate them so they can have access to the mine. So like you start joining all these dots, and this is the crazy bit, Farzin. I was like, let me look at my pension that I invest in through my company. Out of 88 funds, Farzin, that I can invest in as part of my company pension, only 2 are quote unquote ethical, and Rio Tinto are one of the ethical manufacturers in my pension. This is where the systemic lenses really start to weave themselves together. And this is the journey I'm on personally now, as someone with privilege, is to say, hey, should we not be analyzing and exploring and having the difficult conversation around what's really going on, as you say, behind the curtain? Not to judge anybody, not to blame anyone, just to say, hey, is there a better way, right? And like that realization for me was just like mind-blowing, Farzin.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. You cannot live in a country a colonial country, right? Like that, and not be free of participating in extractive capitalism. Like there's absolutely no, like there's so many things that we have to be mindful of, from like purchasing palm oil, to like what's in our, like the kind of rubber that's like makes our, goes into our tire. Like everything is connected, and that's why like it behooves capitalism. It behooves this structure to tell you that, oh, if you don't like it, then boycott it yourself, and then don't buy these products, buy that product, because like that's better, for the system than telling everybody, hey, collectively come together and then boycott this product or boycott this. Like it's such a, like on an individual level, like they would much rather you like not fly as much than everybody not fly as much, right? So like they make it a very individual experience, and so when it's that individual experience, you forget about it and you kind of revert back to it because you can't avoid it. But that's the problem, is that like in this type of capitalism, you're expected to know and do everything on an individual level. Whereas my whole thing is that, and I say this a lot, like, people ask me, oh, what's your solution for this? And I'm like, I don't know. Myself, I don't know, but we know, we will know. Let's have a conversation about it and figure that out, because everyone's going to bring a particular understanding and a lens and a lived experience to all of this, right? And so, that's, I think that for a lot of us, we get so weighed down, like by just, first off, how did we get here? Like we're destroying the planet in such a way that's so fast. It's like a blink of an eye, all the time. And we're harming people at this rate as well. It almost feels too much for, it is too much for one person to carry. But if we all get together and create these arrangements where we all have power, right? And then we all have decision-making capacity, and then we can all choose, okay, we're going to work with this supplier, which is much more ethical and incrementally. I mean, I don't like the term incrementalism because we need more than that right now. We need to leapfrog into something better, because everybody is worried about what's going to happen in 2040 and beyond, even closer than that, because sometimes it's like you read the news and a particular ecosystem is collapsing, you're like, I don't even know if we're going to last the next few years. But that aside, we got to do something, right? So like, I think this type of interconnectedness, cooperative economics, so far from what I know, is the way to go, right? And so we can't do everything. We can't rely on ourselves to everything. Yeah, that doesn't mean not doing your part.
Mm-hmm.
We all understand what our part is, have a discussion about what our part is, and stick to it, and then hold each other accountable to that part. So that's what cooperative economics. That's what basically what I'm hoping to kind of create these in my work, and then eventually on platforms like this, plant some seeds to the point where I'm not going to give you the answers because I don't know them. I don't think any one person knows them, but we all do. Like, if we all come together and kind of have these conversations and create these spaces where we're all having these dialogues and saying, oh, guess what, this organization's doing this. Let's try. Like, here's an alternative. And so, like, it's the collective that's going to kind of change things.
I love it. I've literally just had, anyone that follows me on this show, I had the massive energetic reaction in the back of my neck. You just expressed then, Farzin, seriously, because I just love what you're speaking to. And I think for me, this is so much about creating the conditions, right? How do you create the conditions where we slow down, allow every voice to be seen and heard, and get those perspectives into the space, virtually or in person? Because, I look at my own organization and the industry I'm part of, Farzin, and what I see is we are suffocating under silence.
Mm-hmm.
The fear, particularly those like myself with privilege, they don't. I can categorically speak from the heart and from a place of knowing. People with all this money and power, most of them aren't that happy. Like, I've seen the evidence, I've seen the statistics. They're not any happier than you or I. They just happen to not have to suffer as much. But up here, mindset, I think it's Russell Brand shared something like the top 10 the 10 most richest billionaires on the planet have the most therapy and the most problems, right? So it's like mentally, not physically, not in terms of like money and access to resource, but from a spiritual point of view, they're gone. And it's just like, what I'm really intrigued by is next week we've got Haluk coming on from the first ever self-managed chemical company. He's joining me next Monday. And what's really interesting, he said he became free again when he fired himself as CEO and moved towards self-management with his team. He felt free again as CEO because he was no longer had all of that power on his single shoulders. He got rid of it, right?
Exactly.
And I think this is what you're speaking to, Farzin.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, one of the things that I'm always asked, like, why would any CEO or anybody give up power to kind of have, and then you're kind of, well, the incentive is, you're going to take a pay cut, right? But you're also going to have so much, you're going to distribute risk and responsibility too. Like, if something goes wrong with the organization, it's not going to all fall on your shoulders. Plus, you're going to not empower, but actually give power to your employees to make decisions on the spot because they know their work better than the CEO would know, right? So if something something comes up and there's like, on the factory floor there's an issue, that individual has the autonomy to be like, okay, so I know how to fix this. I'm going to go ahead and fix this. If I don't know, I'm going to ask across, not up, and it's not going to go to this person and that person and get approval, and so waste time through this system. And I think it's much more like just freeing, like you're saying, to have these arrangements, because it's like you're distributing power, you're distributing risk, you're distributing responsibility, and you're ultimately distributing happiness, right? Engagement and all these things. And so all these self-managed organizations, they do research on them, they find that they have like near 100% rates of retention. Their employee engagement is through the roof. Like they really care about what they're doing, right? Because there's no stigmas anymore of unskilled versus skilled. Everybody's on the same level. Like, you're not answering to anybody, but you're seeking coaching and mentoring. You're not seeking an order, right? So like those types, that you break that power, you break that fear, and then you automatically have that psychological safety built in, right? You don't have to, so you don't have to continuously intervene to change the culture where you've already created the structure for it, which influences the culture, which influences individual behavior. So I think I'm very, very fascinated in that. I think to hear this guest next week, I think it's a very powerful thing to hear directly from the source, so very cool.
Well, you two will be getting connected should you both want to be connected, because I think this is the beauty of these platforms, right? This is the point, to really reinforce where you started about power. Like, the thing I'm most excited about is how you intentionally stopped saying empowering. It was getting rid of my power, or we co-support one another and distribute together. No one needs to give Farzin anything. No one needs to give Gary anything in terms of power, right?
Yeah.
We just need to put the stuff in the middle and decide how best to organize that.
Right. Yeah, it's even like at the fundamental level, it's inherently problematic, right? I feel good giving you some power to do this. Like, why don't I have the power to begin with to make decisions based on what you hired me for, right? My expertise, right? And that extrapolate that into our entire societies based on that. Our relationships are based on that, right? So kind of going back full circle, we're so comfortable, we're so used to this idea that something has to drive us or have power over us for us to be able to do something, and that's anti-liberation, right? That's the exact opposite of what liberation is. Liberation is me recognizing, making commitments, me recognizing that I have obligations and having the autonomy to seek them and do them myself, which for the most part people will do, right? People don't if you're really engaged in your work, you're gonna do it, and you're gonna do it well, and you're gonna seek to improve it, right? It's an inherent human drive. I can't speak that it's not for that's not true of everybody, but for those individuals it's not true of, I find that they're in a very, very small minority of people, right? For the most part, you give something to somebody who really enjoys that particular task, and they're going to seek to be better at it, and going to seek to share their knowledge and things like that. And so I think it's just we're taught from a very, very young age that we have to take commands. In our education system, it's very, very that same pyramidal structure. Like, it's not, we're downloading knowledge to the point where it's absolute, we don't encourage kind of conversations in the classroom. I mean, we're getting better at that, of course, but it's still it's everywhere. And that's why I think we have to do this collectively. All of us have to take a sort of decolonize and deconstruct our own spaces, every space, and recognize that, is this an expression of power, or is this actual expression of absolute truth and knowledge, right? Are you doing this to get something from me, or are you doing this to actually contribute? So all those questions have to be asked in every single space. And so I think that in that collective is where we're going to seek to find that liberation.
That's amazing. I'm really conscious of time. I want to keep you for another hour and a half. Have you got another 5 minutes, Farzin?
Sure. Yeah.
I just want to share some of the comments that our wonderful guests have kindly joined us. So Laura's joined us. Said distributing power equals trusted, invested employees. This is a much more grown-up, sustainable model. I suggest it will breed real ingenuity. Absolutely, Laura. Absolutely. And Katrina, thanks for staying with us. I like the use of the word arrangements. What arrangements can be made to get this ball rolling? Distribution of power. I love that so much. Do you want to pick that up? Do you have any sort of, if you were going into a new client tomorrow, what would some of your suggestions be as Farzin to sort of coach or support a leadership team with redistributing or giving away some of that power? Do you have any ideas in the moment?
Yeah, so that's the that area of expertise I usually kind of I'm more interested in partnering with, because there's a lot of great people out there. I have a friend. His name is Ted Rao, who speaks to a lot of a process called sociocracy. There are like multiple ways of kind of moving towards self-management. So what I usually frame it as is like, you have the full self-management model, and then you have something that replicates it. Like if you can't break the hybrid structure now, what you can do is you can build in checks into kind of or checks at the hybrid structure, right? So like the easiest way to think about that is like if you're still operating in capitalist hierarchy, a check to that structure is unionization, or creating employee resource groups, or creating like multiple eyes or multiple minds to kind of review things, right? Distribute those things, but ultimately power is still concentrated in the hands of a few. That's where most of the people, like my clients, are kind of more interested in now, like very incremental approach. Like let's try this a little bit. Let's kind of do a cultural flattening as opposed to a structural flattening. But when it comes to the structural flattening, like I'm going to be very honest in that that's not my area of expertise. And so when I do kind of talk to those things, I will partner with individuals. I mean, I have a lot of resources on self-managing organizations that might help, like from sociocracy to Frederick Laloux has a lot of great work on his book Reinventing Organizations kind of changed my perspective on things. He talks about the Teal organization. There's a lot of actual companies that are in Europe and Latin America that are replicating this process of going teal. And so it's an interrogation of basically how decisions are made, moving from a single individual to circles of decision making, right? Like having groups make decisions on certain topics, human resources, finance, all these things, as opposed to having like a single head of department kind of making the ultimate say. So I mean, there's quite a few, and my goal for this year is to actually aggregate some of those things into on a website that I hope to kind of at least introduce people to different models of self-management, and so take it from there. But that's another thing on my plate.
Keep them spinning, Farzin. Keep them spinning. Do you know what I say? I just want to acknowledge you as well, though, because what I really saw in that response was just the perfect example of your embodiment of your work, right? You didn't pretend to say, I know that answer. Or actually, straight away, you automatically just said, hey, it's not my strength, but I can co-liberate with someone else and find that solution for you, right?
Yeah.
Just wonderful. What modeling? Yeah, thank you for that.
Just real quick, one thing I'll add to that, like very quick, is that my interest is like how to engage or how to be authentically you in those environments. That's like, so like, what does DEI look like in self-managed organizations? It's not going to end. It's just going to shift. When we kind of dismantle the power structure, the conversations are going to be easier, but the old system will always find a way to replicate in the new system. So like we have to make sure that we're checking each other on these pervasive ideas that come from colonization, ideological colonization, as we're dismantling the structure of it. So my interest is in that. So when I partner, so we're still going to learn about like our past and how we got here and these processes that show up, but it's going to be a much better experience because you're not worried about getting fired, or you're not worried about saying something that's going to ultimately hurt you down the road. Speaking to your truth, I mean.
Amazing. Well, as I say, I could keep you for another hour and a half, but I don't know if you've got the time. But I would love to give you the last word. But I want to say thanks for capturing that, Katrina. I didn't want to go away from Farzin. Yeah, I thought that was a brilliant question. Yeah, is it an expression of power, or is it actually an expression of contribution? What a beautiful questions to ask. I love you capturing that. So really, the last, thank you again. This is the first time we've met. I hope it's the first of many conversations, Farzin. But I want to give you the last word. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with our listeners, either watching us live or watching back?
Sure. So if you're interested in me and my work, connect with me on LinkedIn. I have if you're interested in my company, Critical Equity Consulting, it's criticalequity.com. I tend to post a lot of my offerings that are coming up. I have a few things coming up for the Northern Virginia Mediation Service starting February 24th. You can check it out on my LinkedIn page. I posted about it. Basically, a series of conversations around power and then creating inclusive environments from that power lens. And so I post regularly about things that I do and what I'm up to, and kind of nuggets of the flavor of the day that I think about in the morning, and I try and put it in a certain context and make sure it's accessible. So yeah, feel free to follow me and check out my website.
That's amazing. Well, again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Thanks, John, Vivian, Katrina, Laura. Just beautiful expert. I can't wait to listen to this one back, to be honest. So have a great afternoon, Farzin. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.